How's it going? This is Steve, and welcome to Stuck on an Island. I'm trying to do some new stuff here. I know I create a lot of stuff that I either don't put out or I never really explain the process. And so for 2020, I'm actually trying to explain my process a lot better. And now that I have a better camera, I have a microphone, I figured might as well put my best foot forward with all this new technology stuff. And so over the past year, I've gotten into augmented reality. And it's definitely been a very interesting experience because I was a Windows mobile developer like 10 years ago, coming out of high school. And when they trashed that project, then I kind of got into the arts, the more technical stuff though. So, After Effects, animation, all that stuff, design. And so now that I'm back into AR, I'm doing augmented reality books because, my goal is to try to get more books in the hands of people. It's cool to have a screen, it's cool to have a book, but when you combine the two, then it makes for an amazing experience. And so when I was learning, I noticed that it just wasn't too bad to actually do all this stuff, with new technology and everything. It's been an amazing experience to be able to create these new waves of technology just from my home. As you can see, I have a new studio. And so I think this app right here, it's for one of my clients that I'm working on, and it's meant to interface with a book that they're trying to produce. And so I made it from start to finish, and about, I want to say an hour and a half and stuff. So you'll see me working on the cover as well as augmenting the cover and making the app and all the different interface stuff. It was pretty simple, pretty bare bones. Obviously, I would do a lot more to have a final build for this. But for first build, it wasn't too bad. I did this in one sitting, in less than 2 hours. So we'll go ahead and take a look at it. Okay, so this is fresh in the morning, so I'm just going through and looking for 3D models of a fist, because the cover has a fist in it. And so I found some 3D models that I could work with. And it didn't take too long to actually find this stuff, surprisingly. And I actually found some ones, some really, really good assets that I was looking for. And so all I'm doing here is actually looking at different angles to take pictures of, so I could use those as references. This was before I found out that I could actually download it. And so I had a sketch of what I wanted the cover to look like. And so I oriented it as much as possible, and then I really just started overlaying that image in there, the reference image, and started tracing over it. So I give myself a little bit of creative wiggle room with it, but for the most part, it worked as a really, really good reference when I was able to actually implant it in there. And so once I got it, I typically go over 3 passes. So one is just a sketch, then I'll go over with a ink, and then another one with shadows and stuff like that, and maybe add some thicker lines. So after that, just start to render it out in black and white, because it's just always easier to do that way. And so again, I'm going through and I'm going with another pass for it, and this is to just clean up the lines a little bit. And I think I used a very textured brush, so it's kind of wispy if you want to look at it. If you look at it from the beginning, very close on. And you can notice all that texture for the shadow. And so later on, I tried to get rid of the shadow, that texture in the shadow that I really didn't want, but for the most part, it was pretty nicely. And so this time, I'm actually going through and making the outer outlines a lot more pronounced, so making them a little thicker. And time for the color. And so the color is pretty easy. I tend to always use a lot of blending modes. I think that's just one of the great things about Photoshop, is that I'll lay over a color and then I'll add another layer to it, add another color, and start building it that way. And so adding highlights, blending it a lot more with other different colors, and then going around and cleaning it up, and adding white, adding gradients. What I like to do is I like to add smart objects and then use a blur effect and actually blur out the actual image on that layer and then try to blend it into the background or the foreground of the other layers. And so it's like, for me, it's like building blocks. Another thing that I found is using a high pass, so actually copying all the layers and grouping them together, and then making a duplicate, and then actually adding a high pass filter to it, and then overlaying that over it. And so, it gives me some interesting renders from that. And so now I'm taking some other ideas from other covers that I was working on with that, and I decided to kind of have the fist sort of pop out of that one. And so that was a last minute decision, and so I just kind of worked with the idea a little bit more. And so now I'm just kind of ripping the image apart, and kind of molding it to the image that is kind of like being poked out of it. And so obviously with Facebook, or with Photoshop, I don't know why I keep saying Facebook, but ultimately with Photoshop, it's a creator's tool. And so I use different motion graphics, I use different effects, different blending modes. I've gotten into like smart objects, playing with different compositions, and playing around with that the effect and what I wanted to do. And so I'm adding some more shadows to this after the fact, just so it kind of gives that three-dimensionality to it, and then giving it a little bit of highlight so it stands out a little bit more. And so I keep going back and forth because I need to make sure that like the tape, the red lines, the red tape is oriented in the right space. So after that, I move on to a different cover, because I ended up showing 4 covers total to the client. One is this one, or 2 are these, and then 2 of the other ones. Because we started off with about, I want to say 8 or 9 different cover styles, and then after that, they narrowed it down to 3 or 4, and so then I gave them. I combined one and 2, and then I ended up giving them another one. So it's ended up turning out pretty good. So that was me creating the superimposed cover. That's cover 1 and 2 that they liked, and then there's cover 3, which was the just the background. And so now I'm going into Unity, adding the package name, adding all the icons and stuff like that. I think I had to update. I use the Vuforia SDK, and so I had to update Vuforia and make sure that it was up to date, because if it's not, then it causes problems. And also had a Photoshop document that I created all my like menu assets for. So buttons, button layouts, all those different things I needed to create in Photoshop, and I typically just export them out as PNGs. It's always the easiest. And so after that, after I have all my images, I'll go ahead and upload them. Obviously, change my music and stuff, but I'll upload all the images in a database in Vuforia. Then I'll download that and export it into my Unity project. And that's always the easiest. Once like the images are done, it's pretty easy. And I'm going through the button layout, and the button layout is pretty much just exactly like how I have it in Photoshop. And then I play around with it. It's not like a one-to-one, but it's a really good template. And so then I add my 3D model to it. Make sure to scale it so that it orients in a good way, or in a good position on the screen, or on my on the app. And after that, I try to add some textures to it, but that's the thing that sucks about models that you don't have, you don't have the source code to, is just you don't have the flexibility to edit them the way that you want sometimes. And so, and it's a free asset, so I didn't have to create it myself. And so then I just like made a little logo and added that to the augmented reality thing. Interesting enough, like I started working on these buttons, and the buttons didn't really turn out the way I wanted them to. And I'll talk about that later. But really, it's I for this one, the client wanted an overlay, and so when you look at the cover, an overlay appears. And so I actually make a canvas, and then I add a different panel to it, and then I pretty much scale the panel to how I want it, and then I just add that image to it, and it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. And so here, adding an in-app browser, because one of the things is I want to make sure that the users stay in the app as long as possible. And so by adding an in-app browser, you're able to take them to different locations within the app without them actually leaving the app. And so they have like a downloadable toolkit, and they have a pledge form that they want users to actually interact with. And so by building in-browser links, you could click the browser and you could actually send them to that without them actually leaving the app. And so that's pretty good functionality that I use with a plugin that I got off of the Unity asset store. And so now I have trying to do the menu screen. And the menu screen, I'm still waiting on the final version of it, but I updated their logo. I made a whole bunch of different like Chrome apps because they're going with like a Chrome feel, and I just pretty much made a whole bunch of different mock-ups, and then I just recreated one in Unity. Again, it's not one-to-one, but it still kind of works. And then I built a scene loader and made 3 different scenes. So I have the information scene, which is right here, and then it has a button going back to the main scene, and so the question mark initiates that information scene. And then the other one is the main scene and the actual scene that you want it to be for the augmented reality. And so it was definitely a great one to work on, and it took me about, I want to say, maybe like, I would say it took me longer to actually like make the cover than it did to actually make the app, which is always interesting. You always want the app to be, the app is supposed to be like the highlight, and it often isn't the case sometimes. And so it's but it's just one of those things, just one of those things. And so with that is pretty much how I make an app. I know it's pretty quick. I sped it up. I think the total runtime was about 4 hours, and I sped it up to like 10 minutes of footage. But the idea that you can make an augmented reality app in less than a day with very little resources, as long as you have an image target, some 3D models and stuff. Obviously you have like animation and stuff that you could add to it, and I didn't want to do too much here. I just wanted to really see how long it would take for me to build an app from start to finish with the open Unity project. And so after I did that, I had a working prototype. The client liked it, and you kind of move on with it. And so if any, check out all my other videos. Check out the Stuck E podcast, which is STUCK and E in the podcast. Eyeland Fever, building a podcast for that, and building an augmented reality app as well. And so, definitely be sure to follow me on everything at Iltopia. Subscribe here. For all my Pokemon Tour Team fans, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. And kind of go from there. See you.